Well, welcome back to another episode of Two Blokes, a Beer, and a Podcast. Now, it's been a couple of weeks, but I am back, and of course, my trusty pal Craig is back. Craig, how you been?
Good, thanks, Joey, mate. Still got, it's crazy. I think it's been a couple of weeks, but yeah, still got goosebumps from that. One of the best grand finals I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly a week since the grand final, and a couple of weeks since we last got on together. But let's get into it. We want to talk a bit about grand finals tonight. Of course, Two Blokes Beer in a Pod. It's the lighter side of rugby league. We like to have a bit of fun, have a bit of banter, usually chat some chick flicks. But this week, we're going to talk grand finals, mate, and we're going to talk great grand finals that we remember. And I want us to give our top five later in the episode. Our top five grand finals that we've watched or that we've loved personally. Let's start off, though, with just some classic grand finals. What for you would be, well, I don't want to give away the top five yet. So let's say, where would this grand final that we saw last week, where would that rate amongst the great grand finals?
Oh, right up there, Joey. It
Yeah,
was one of the best, and full credit to the referee as well.
absolutely.
It was just one of those games. I had flashbacks to some other grand finals that we'll talk about that will make up the top five, but yeah, it's definitely in there for sure.
Yeah, it's got to be. I think just the way that the teams overcame adversity, both of them, the Broncos losing, then the Broncos winning, then Penrith losing, then Penrith winning, just incredible stuff. But without further ado, let's get into it. You can start off with your top five for us. What are the top five best grand finals that you've witnessed?
Top five grand finals I've seen. I think I go back to I've got to put in there Melbourne and Cronulla. Melbourne went into that grand final. What was that? 2016. Melbourne going to
2016.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, Melbourne going to their favourites to win. Cronulla haven't had a lot of success against them, and Cronulla had been through a lot as a club as well. You know, they've been wooden spooners. They've had their struggles. So for them to hang on there in that last set of six, and I just remember the relief on Mick Ennis and Gallen
Yeah.
and that will definitely be up there. The bromance between Eddinghausen embracing Gallen after the game as well. So that was good. That was one of my best. Not too far away from that would probably be the grand final before that, which was Brisbane and Cowboys. I mean,
Yeah.
Jonathan Thurston, like you couldn't have written a better script for him. I'm sure he would have preferred to have got that kick from the sideline, but you feel for Paul Benny Hunt who dropped the ball in that game. So for me, the key grand finals are the ones where you can remember
Yeah.
a couple of key moments from that game, but what you were doing at the time you were watching it. And I go back to the Melbourne Cronulla. I remember we were down the coast with the kids. The kids were only little. I was in a tiny place trying to be quiet. The Brisbane Cowboys game, it was similar. We're in a caravan park, so trying to be quiet when we're watching it and the kids are asleep. So they're the key ones for me. The '89 grand final, even though it hurts as a Balmain boy, I was pretty young, Joey, so I was only
Yeah.
4 years old at the time, so it's really hard to say I sat there and can remember it, but just appreciating it for what it was over time. They're probably definitely up there in my top three, and then I've got to put the Brisbane Penrith one in there as well. That
Yeah.
for me is number two. Just the way that Cleary got that ball and just sidestepped him and made his way through, I thought was absolutely incredible. And it had a
And I think we
flashback for
all know
me.
what your number one will be, mate, as well.
Well, I was about to say it had a flashback of me of the '97 grand final when Andrew Johns goes down the
Oh,
blind and he chucks it into Albert to go and score. But I did leave one out of there, obviously, and that is the mighty West Tigers beat the Cowboys. But that was a game. I was at that game, Joey, and that was the grand final where we never felt like we are going to lose.
yeah.
Like we were celebrating that win as fans before kickoff. So yes, it's my favourite grand final in the fact that it was my club's first ever grand final. But as far as the nitty gritty and just overall performance wise, yeah, they're my five.
Mate, absolutely love it. It's a great five. Mine's a little bit similar. I do have a bit of a Roosters theme in mind. Of course, I do remember a lot of them, being a diehard Roosters fan. But number five for me, my earliest grand final memory and the one that I remember the most, 2003, Roosters and Panthers. And the reason I remember grand finals are for those big moments. 2003, Scott Sattler Toddy
Yeah.
Byrne running down the sideline. He's in for all money. No one in front of him, mate. No one in front of him. Roosters win that game if Todd Byrne scores. Scott Sattler, great tackle on the sideline. I remember I was 7 and I cried.
You were 7.
I was
Far
7,
out.
mate, 2003.
7. Far out, Joey. I remember walking into the pub. I must have been 18. I walked into the pub. And again, it was one of those things. I remember where I was sitting at the time.
Yeah,
Chooks were hot favourites to do it.
yeah.
And everyone in the sports bar was saying, Chooks by 20, Chooks by 20. I remember that. I don't remember much of the game. I remember standing up when Sattler made the tackle. But what I do remember is hours later, waking up at a bus stop. I passed out at a bus stop after some
Wow.
celebrations and woke up to my old Nokia 5110 or whatever it was vibrating in my pocket.
Well, I certainly wasn't drinking back then. Yes, I was 7, showing our age a little bit there. But yeah, 7 years old. And I remember it was my first taste of defeat in a grand final. Obviously, I started watching footy in 2002, the year before when I was 6. Roosters won the comp that year. So I'd only seen them as successful, hadn't really seen a loss, cried. Excuse me, sorry. And I just remember it because I was at my granddad's, and it's like you said, you remember where you were. I was at my granddad's, we're watching the game, and it was just heartbreaking stuff. Next one, number 4 for me. You mentioned it before, but 2016 and Melbourne Sharks. The reason for it was the Sharks had been in the comp for 48 years at that point.
Yeah.
Sorry, just having a drink. The Sharks had been in the comp for 48 years at that point and had never won a premiership. They had been in some great grand finals, but had never won a comp. It was the only thing that had eluded these great Sharks players, and even Paul Gallen thought he may have finished his career without a premiership. So 2016 was up there. Andrew Fafita, mate, that winning try,
Oh,
incredible
how
stuff.
he did not get Clive Churchill is
Yeah,
beyond.
I know. Well, did Luke Lewis get no? James
Lewis
Maloney
got
got
it,
it.
yeah. Who had a great game, but
Yeah,
nothing compared to Fafita. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But I remember that game again. At that stage, I was 20, I want to say 20, 21, 20, 21. I was at a pub, Central Coast, the entrance, Lakes Hotel. Shout out to the Lakes. I remember
Nice,
where I
nice.
was watching that game. And yeah, that was a big one. Number 3, 2013 grand final, mate. Roosters and Manly.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I remember this game is because Manly got in front. And this Roosters team in 2013 were not meant to even win the season. They were $101 at the start of that year to even finish the season in first place. We won the minor premiership
Was that
because
Robbo's first year?
Robbo's first year as
Yeah,
coach. He
got
brought
you.
over
Yeah.
James Maloney, Sonny Bill came, Luke O'Donnell. So we got
That's right.
some bigger
Yeah.
names, some troops that helped. But we had Mitchell Pearce and James Maloney in the halves, and they were just incredible, just worked wonders. Sean Kenny Dow, Semi Perrott, Anthony Minicello, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, those sort of boys out in the back line. But I remember it because 2012 didn't do so well. I think we're in the bottom 4, 2012. And then Robbo takes over. We get the minor. We then make it to the grand final. And we come up against this Manly team that were just red hot. Cherry Evans just absolutely informed. He actually won the Clive Churchill in that game. It was one of those rare games where the opposition player wins the Clive Churchill, but won't get into that. But I remember, I think the score, I think Roosters were just behind by a try or something. And Mitchell Pearce had kicked the ball and it looked like it was going dead.
Yeah.
Michael Jennings, mate, right before the dead ball line, just came charging through, scored a try right before the dead. And, mate, that was game there. Like, Manly would have won the game. Michael Jennings doesn't do that. So that was number 3 for me. Number 2, as you mentioned before, is 2015. Can't go past it. I just, what a moment. Cowboys Broncos, biggest rivalry in the game, apart from probably Roosters Bunnies. But they just have such a rich history against each other. They've played so many great battles, and for Jonathan Thurston to go out the way he did, I do feel for Benny Hunt. Still regretting it to this day. But the Broncos, they hadn't been in a grand final since 2006 at that point, and then obviously again now. But at that point, hadn't been in one since 2006. They were touted to win this game. Cowboys, Jonathan Thurston just came through. Probably goes a long way to why he's a future immortal. And my number one that I remember is 2023, and it's Panthers and Broncos. Mate, I'm still talking about that game.
Yeah,
I cannot get over what I witnessed last weekend, and it's just incredible stuff. I mean,
it was
the
great.
way that Penrith were able to come back in that 17 minutes and win that game, I have never seen anything like that. As a devout Roosters man, I can only stand and applaud Ivan Cleary, the coaching staff, the players, what that club has done, not only over the past 3 years, but in this grand final to win that game from nothing. I mean, 24-8 down. No one gave them any hope. That's my top five there. But mate, pretty good top five from both of us. There's been some pretty amazing grand finals over the years. Obviously, I don't remember a lot of the ones. I've only heard and seen the folklore, the history that it is. But
Yeah.
just some incredible grand finals. This this dynasty that Penrith are creating, 3 in a row now. We know the grand final history of the Dragons back in the 50s and 60s, 11 in a row. But as we spoke about on our other show during the week, that was before the salary cap. It was sort of before the modern NRL era. Tries were still worth 3 points back then, all that sort of stuff. So to do it in the modern era is amazing. And we haven't really seen a team like this for a long time.
No, I think the team that I can sort of refer to would be Melbourne.
Yeah.
And, look what happened to them. They got stripped apart with the salary cap, but then they still continue to have success. They come back and won it in 2012. But what Panthers are doing, who's to say they can't win it next year? And I didn't think
Right.
I didn't tip them to win it this year, Joey. I thought, nah,
Yeah.
they won't do it. They've won 2. They're not going to do 3. There's no way I'm going to sit there and say they won't win it next year.
Let's talk a bit about these dynasties. So over the years, we've seen certain teams, I wouldn't say on a run like this, but we've seen teams go back to back. We've seen teams do some amazing things in a season to get to a grand final. Melbourne and the Roosters probably dominated the 2010s. From 2010 to where we are now in 2023, the back end has been Penrith. But I would say from 2010 to about 2020, Roosters and Melbourne were the top 2 teams. They dominated
Yeah,
most
definitely.
years. There was a few years in there, Bunnies won, obviously, and then we actually had 2014, 15, and 16 was not Roosters and Melbourne. Well, 2016 was, but no Roosters for 2014, 15, 16 until they finally won it again in 2018 and 19. But over that period, those teams dominated. We saw Manly and Bulldogs in the 80s, and of course, Parramatta as well. They had some really big dynasties back then. The Rabbitohs for a long time before they were out of the comp, they had a dynasty. Probably more the early days, the 30s, 40s for the Bunnies. Back in the day of your Clive
Yeah.
Churchill and those sort of players, how they dominated for such a long period of time. And then you look at a modern era, it's got to be Penrith now, but I would actually say the Bulldogs. The early 2000s, I thought the Dogs were really strong. Made one grand final in 2004, but they were thereabouts in 2005 again. Uh, of course, getting stripped of points earlier in the 2000s. But yeah, there's just been a few dynasties. I think the biggest one we've seen, and it's not so much a grand final, but it's Queensland Origin, mate. Made up a lot of those Melbourne players,
Oh,
those
absolutely.
Queensland
Yeah.
players. The Broncos, they were probably a big one of the 90s, as were the Raiders. Raiders and Broncos probably dominated the 90s. So it's been eras where certain teams have just dominated and then they just seem to drop off. And
And
I don't know what your take is on those dynasties, but it's just been so thrilling to watch Penrith over the past 3 years.
it certainly has been full credit to him. I think, as Luai said, love us, hate us, you got to respect us, and
That's right.
he's true. I agree with him on that one. Going back to some of the teams, I look back at the 90s and I feel sorry. How can you not feel sorry for the Dragons? They lost 92, they lost 93, they lost 96. And then they merged and they lost 99 in which was, how that didn't make either of our lists, I suppose. I only watched that grand final the other week and
True.
Dragons had that all stitched up. They had it all stitched up. They should have won that game. I think they're up 12-2 or something at halftime. They should have ran away with it. When I look back at the grand finals, to me, that really take away the performances of the game. And my top 5 was just purely down to, spectacle, just down to watching the game and how tight it was. But when I go back and I look at the ones that I think are super special, Cronulla, as you mentioned, 40-odd years of history there. They'd lost a few in the lead up to it, including the 97 Super League grand final.
Yeah.
The other ones, West Tigers. I remember when the West Tigers come in, Joey, we were tipped to be wooden spooners in the first year of the 2000. Wayne Pearce was our coach. And for half of the season, we sat in second on the ladder. And then the comp was so tight then, we lost 2 games in a row. And we went from 2nd, 7th, 9th and just didn't recover at the end. And that's the only thing that stopped us. But when they won it in 2005, it did feel like a big FU to everyone. That's how it felt. And like, call it whatever you want to call it, but I knew we were going to win 2005. Like, once we got on that roll and we got going into the semis, there was never a doubt. We knocked off Cowboys week 1. Then we knocked off a struggling Brisbane, who won it the next year. Then we played Dragons, and Dragons and Parramatta were tipped to win it that year. And we had, in 2005, we actually lost to Parramatta twice in the regular season. So we didn't beat Parra in 2005. So when they got pumped by the Cowboys, we beat the Dragons to get into the grand final. We'd already smashed the Cowboys in week 1 by 30 points. So we were confident we'd win it. That's why that one was special to me, seeing my club win their first ever grand final and being doubted for the last few years. But the other one is when South come back in 2014, they were kicked out of the competition. And the story of Adam Reynolds, yes, he's a Bronco now, park that. Adam Reynolds marching down George Street, holding his dad's hand to bring South Sydney back into the comp. And they got wooden spoon after wooden spoon after wooden spoon. Russell Crowe comes in, buys the club, turns it into, whether you agree with it or not, turns it into a strong club. And Reynolds is the halfback and wins the grand final with him. I think that, as far as the Cinderella story goes, can't be topped.
And it had been about 50 years since they had won a comp. It was the 70s since they won their last before 2014. So it was massive for them because it had been so long. Let's talk about some premiership droughts. We obviously know the Sharks had a massive one before they won in 2016, but Parramatta now hold the record for the biggest premiership drought at the moment. 86, I believe, was their last one. So I think they're going on, is it 37 years, I heard? It's about that anyway. But 37 odd years, and they're the biggest drought at the moment. But the Broncos are actually getting up there as well. They're creeping up to 20 years now. 2006 was their last grand final win. So in 3 more years, they're at 17 years now without a grand final win, second only to Parramatta. And you got the Warriors, who haven't won a comp at all, so they're 28 years. But some big droughts, mate. But when a team wins, I remember 2016, because not only did the Sharks win, but if you go across a few different codes, there was so many Western Bulldogs won the AFL and they hadn't won a flag for 60-odd years. Leicester City won the English Premier League and they hadn't won for about 80 years. And then I think it was the Boston Red Sox. They won the baseball the same year. And it was all these, there was like 4 teams that hadn't won for 60, 70 years that all won in the same year. So it was a pretty incredible year. But, mate, they are just some wonderful grand finals, wonderful dynasty. What are you up to tonight? Are you watching a chick flick at all?
No. Oh, look, I probably will. As I tell myself, no, I'm going to go for a night walk, which would be good. I'm kid free this weekend. I did watch a chick flick the other night actually, and it was not planned. I was just sort of scrolling through, and I went, "I'll give this a watch." I can't remember what it was. I cannot remember what it was, but it was bloody good, Joey. It gave me motivation. It was good.
Sounds like it. We'll get that recommendation up soon. But that's about all we have time for today. Just a little quick one. Just wanted to check in, say good day to everybody. We will obviously be back in the next few weeks. Don't forget our cricket podcast starts this week as well. You can find us under the Ruck Infringement banner, 2 Blokes, a Beer and a Podcast. This will be up as soon as this is over. Just got to go have my dinner first. But Craig, thanks for jumping on, man.
That's all right. Hey, Joe, before you go, speaking of grand finals, shout out to your old boy who's playing his last ever official rugby league game, Mitchell Pearce, and it's the Cattle and Dragons are in the grand final. So
yes, how good. And we hope the the Catalans get up. They actually haven't
Hope they
won
get
one.
it done.
So
I know our show is pretty big over there, so wee to everyone over there, and best of luck to Mitchell Pearce.
yeah, let's hope Junior can bring it home. How good. All right. Thank you, Craig. I'll see
Cheers,
you next
mate.
time, mate. Be good to your mum.